Everyone has entered the room who was waiting, so welcome. We'll go ahead and get things going here. Welcome to After the Move to Memory Care. My name is Amy Abrams. I'm the Director of Education with Alzheimer's San Diego. Very pleased to have you with us here today. This is, of course, a dementia education program of Alzheimer's San Diego. We'll tell you more about ourselves and the support and services that we offer at the end of the program. But for now, I want to introduce you to my co-presenter here today. Really pleased to get to present this program with our president and CEO, my boss, Eugenia Welch. Welcome, Eugenia.
Thank you so much. But Amy is definitely my boss for the next 90 minutes here today, as this is her program. But I'm happy to be here with everybody and hope I can help in some small way.
Yeah, fun times during webinars. I get to be her boss. So Eugenia brings to this program many years. In fact, Eugenia, maybe I'll just ask you to say a few words about your experience. She's been with us at Alzheimer's San Diego in the role of our president and CEO for 3 years now, but has a long history of working in residential care. So brings some real expertise to today's program.
Yeah, I was the executive director of a couple different assisted living communities here in San Diego for a total of, oh gosh, about 24 years. So have a lot of experience in senior care and memory care, and specifically in San Diego County. So have that knowledge I can share, and then have also been involved with this organization prior to coming on board as CEO as a volunteer. So happy to be here.
Yeah, I just want to start out by saying that, you know, the world of residential care, as in everything else in the world right now, is in a state of constant flux. And so we are speaking, Eugenia and I are going to be speaking today about how things generally work in the world of residential care when you're assisting someone with the transition into assisted living or memory care or moving into a skilled nursing facility. There are some changes, and we'll note them where we can, how things are different right now because of the pandemic, and also because of the lifting of restrictions that is happening right now as the pandemic is beginning to abate. So things are changing, but we'll do our best to cover as broadly as we can. We'll be talking about how to make that smooth transition into residential care, both for the person who's living with dementia and for you as the care partner, how to build a successful and productive, positive relationship, hopefully, with the staff that are providing support to your loved one, as well as the administration of the building. And then, of course, the very important topic of managing the changes that you're going to experience as a result of the transition after the person has made a move. So we'll be talking about adjusting to the new relationship you're going to have with this person, and the new relationship, frankly, that you will have with yourself during and after the move to memory care. So I will start by talking about making that smooth transition, making that transition as smooth as we possibly can. So every community has a little bit different of an admissions process, and during the process of touring a community and making the decision that yes, this is the right place for us, they're going to talk you through what to expect, what you're going to need to do in the way of paperwork. Eugenia will be talking about some of that paperwork here in a little bit. They'll talk you through their specific assessment process and what it is that they're going to ask from you in terms of background information. What I want to say about that is go all in at this point during the transition, during the admissions process. Try to share as much information as you can. The more information that you can give them about who this person is, who they have been throughout their life, and not just in terms of their physical needs, their activities of daily living, medications that they're taking, and their medical history. All of that is critically important. But they're going to ask you some questions about the person's background, their interests, their preferences, things about their personality, the things they love to do, the types of people that they enjoy. All of that is really, really important. And the more of that you can give them up front, the more successful you're all going to be able to make this transition together. What should you do in terms of setting up the person's accommodations? This is a big task, and I'm going to talk about it quickly. And I don't mean to make light of it, because it is a very large task. But just a couple of tips on making the accommodations, making this part of the transition as seamless as you can. Aim for simplicity. I think one of the challenges that I saw in my years of working as a care manager and supporting many families through the transition into residential care was the sense that we needed to bring a little bit of everything from the home into this new apartment. If it's a 2-bedroom, a 1-bedroom, a studio, a shared unit, kind of didn't matter. No matter the size, people feel this impulse to, sort of have little bits of every part of that person's life in the new apartment. It's a totally understandable impulse, but I want to say less is kind of more when it comes to this transition, right? Have those familiar objects, set up little a seating area. If there's a favorite easy chair that makes them feel comfortable, that they're going to recognize this particular setup, my chair, my table, my lamp, my little set of familiar books or figurines, right? Whatever it might be. If you have the space and the capacity to set that up to help it feel familiar and comfortable for the person, that's terrific. But you don't have to try to recreate their original home in this new setting, right? Keep enough around that's familiar and comfortable for them, but keep it simple. Aim for familiarity and comfort, right? Sort of practicality about this. And remember, depending on how the transition goes, you may be able to hang on to some of those things that you're just not sure about, and maybe bring them in later, right? You can always reintroduce things, objects, pieces of furniture, artwork, favorite blankets, right? Whatever those things might be. You can reintroduce those later if you find, yeah, she would benefit from having a few more pillows or, whatever it might be. So setting up the accommodations in that person's sort of style as best you can. Do all of that in advance. We don't want to be setting up the apartment, rustling things around, rearranging furniture on the day that the person is moving in, or while they are still there. You want to try to get that all kind of settled in advance. Now, how about the timing of the move? When is the best time for us to physically make this transition? We've done the assessment, we've given them all the background information, we've set up the new room or the new apartment or the new, area of the skilled nursing facility room. And when is it time to bring the person who's living with dementia to their new environment? So there's no right answer. I encourage you to talk with the staff, the administration, the admissions coordinator, whoever that person may be. Talk with them about their recommendations and what they have seen be successful in that particular environment. But use what you know about this person, right? Do they have a particular time of day that they tend to be at their calmest, at their most lucid, when their mood is the most sort of stable and, the best time of the day for them? That's the time to go, right? So sort of take information from the staff, work with their recommendations, but also use what you know about this person. Depending upon your particular situation, you might also want to try to coordinate this effort with other people in your life who can be a support to you, right? If you're gonna need some emotional support in the moments, minutes, hours, days after you have moved the person into their new environment, right? Then schedule it accordingly. If you've got a family member, a friend who needs to come in from out of town, right? Or just needs to take an afternoon off work to be with you, try to schedule that accordingly. Think not only about your loved one's needs in terms of the transition, but what you're going to need in the moments after it occurs. One of my favorite recommendations is to work with the staff, look at their activity schedule for the day. If you've decided, okay, Thursday the 1st is going to be the day that we're going to make this move, that this transition is going to happen. Have a look at the activity schedule that day and talk with them about, well, my husband, my sister, whoever the person is, really loves music. And if they happen to have a music program going on that afternoon, right, then maybe make the decision to introduce her to the community at the time that this activity is happening. So you can just ease her right into that activity and sort of kind of quietly back away. Right. If you can find a meal time, an activity that's happening that they would be interested in, that you might be able to engage them with, this can really help with making a successful transition. So one of the most common questions that I get in classes and in my years working as a care manager was, how involved should the person be in the decision about where we're going, in the visiting of places, making the choice about the community where they're going to live, and how much should I tell them about what's happening? So again, there is no universally correct way to do this. I can give you a couple of guidelines and I'm happy to do it. And I just want to say this is a perfect example of a reason to reach out and call us at Alzheimer's San Diego, right? If you're in this situation, you've made a selection, you know that the time is coming, and you're just not sure, whether or how to broach the subject with the person who's living with dementia, give us a call and we can talk you through the particulars of your situation. We can sort of take in some information about who the person is and how much insight do they have into their own disease or disability. What is your relationship? And we can hopefully give you some suggestions and guidance around that. But generally speaking, as with furniture and tchotchkes, I would say less is usually more when it comes to communicating generally in life, but especially when it comes to this difficult topic. Should you tell the person that they are going to be moving out of their home and into the care community? I would say in the vast majority of cases, it's actually not advisable to have this conversation in advance, because what it does is it introduces conflict, it introduces anxiety, and it may be more than the person is really capable of understanding. You really have to know, how much insight does this person have into the fact that they have a progressive condition, right? Alzheimer's disease or some other type of dementia. Are they aware of that? And if so, are they aware of how significant their deficits are? If you've reached the point in the journey of living with dementia or caring for someone with dementia, where you are considering residential care options, where you've put down that deposit and you're setting up the apartment, right? In all likelihood, things are pretty advanced, right? Things are pretty far along with that person. Not always, but that could very well be the case. And if that is the case, this is probably not a situation where it's going to be appropriate to tell the person, I've been exploring assisted living or memory care options. I want to take you around to a couple of them to visit. I want to get your approval, right? In most cases, the person is not going to have the ability to understand the nature, the extent of their disabilities. They may not be able to understand the nature of your needs as a care partner. I am exhausted. I physically can't meet your physical demands anymore. I'm not getting any sleep, right? I'm not able to go to work anymore. I'm not able to manage the other situations in our family life, right? All of those things may be true. The person may not have the capacity to understand it. Doesn't mean they don't care about it, right? It's just a product of those brain changes related to their disease. So I think our instinct is always to give people lots of information, to get real in the weeds and focus on the details. But I've chosen a community that's close to home, so I'll be able to visit every day. They have a beautiful garden and you're going to love it. They have a pool, right? Whatever the thing might be. Diving deeper into those details is not necessarily going to be useful or helpful to you in this conversation. So I would say, unless there's a compelling reason to bring them in to be a part of this decision, sort of less is more when it comes to conversations about whether or not they're going to be moving, where they're going to be moving, and when they're going to be moving. Right? Don't feel compelled to make a good argument or present your case. Right? And here I would refer you to our communication skills class, where we talk a lot about learning to focus on a person's feelings to provide validation about how they're feeling, and to offer lots of reassurance and redirect their attention elsewhere. Right? Instead of focusing on we're making a move to this particular community on Thursday, and here's all the reasons why. Right? Instead, try to kind of be in the moment with them. Right? If you can see as you're getting in the car, as you're arriving at the community, that they're feeling anxious about that, that they're confused, that they don't understand why they're there, right? Speak to that, speak to those feelings instead of getting tripped up on all of the details of where you are and why you are there, right? Say, I can see that this is making you nervous. I can see that you're feeling uncomfortable, and I'm here for you, right? This is going to be okay. We're going to get through this together. Right? Instead of kind of spinning your wheels with the what and the why and the how and the when and all of those details. Right? I hope that that's helpful. And again, I want to encourage you, if you have questions, feel free to write them into the Q&A. We'll be happy to, we're going to be taking a break, and we'll be happy to answer as many of those as we can. So in the community itself, after you've made that initial transition, the person is there, they're in those initial days and weeks of their new life within the residential care facility. Different communities will give you different advice on when should you come back, when should you make that first visit. It is not uncommon at all to hear from a community that they recommend that you sort of stay away for a couple of weeks. 2 weeks is not uncommon. A lot of people feel very uncomfortable with that. A lot of the time they feel suspicious of that. What are you doing that you don't want me to see in these first 2 weeks? Right? The nature of that recommendation, at its heart, it's about allowing the staff to help build a relationship with this person. Your visits, your presence may be disruptive, right? It may be an impediment to their being able to build that relationship, to get your person, your loved one, into a new routine around the community, to get them making friends and connections with other people, finding activities they like, right? So that's really the nature of that. That's the basis of that recommendation. It is well intended, but it's up to you, right? I want to be really clear about that. Talk to them about what they recommend, but consider what you know about the person, right? And how they make adjustments to big changes in their life. Consider what you know about the person and their relationship to you, and whether or not your presence is going to remind them, what am I doing here, right? Or if your presence is going to provide them with reassurance. Oh, I'm so glad that you're here, right, with me here in this new environment. So take their recommendations, consider them, and then work with them to come up with a solution that works for you. Many communities are setting up new kind of observation units, which is really neat. So you can come and visit during those initial days and weeks after the person has made the transition. You can come into an observation room and watch, right, through what do they call it? Two-way mirror. Sorry, I've lost my vocabulary there. But you can watch without physically interacting with the person. You can see what's going on in the dining room or the activities room. You can check in on them. And remember that, in these early days and weeks, you can call and get updates, right? They're going to send you emails, depending on their particular setup. The fact that you're not visiting doesn't mean that you can't get regular and consistent updates on them. Right. So you'll hear me say this a few times here today. Just give this time. You're going to need time. They're going to need time. the community is going to need time. We're all getting to know each other. We are all establishing new relationships, new patterns, new habits, new routines. So try to focus on the most important things first. There's going to be lots of things going on in the environment that you're worrying about that you think maybe aren't quite right. We need to make this adjustment to their schedule, to their routine. Oh, she doesn't really like having her soup before her salad, right? Focus on what's important first. Keep in mind what's important to them and also what's important to you. So with that, I'm going to hand things over to Eugenia. And Eugenia, I believe you have the remote control. No, now you should have the remote control. Take it away.
Great. Thanks, Amy. So once you have moved your person into the community, the most important thing to do is build some sort of rapport and relationship with the community staff, because really the staff is there to help take care of you as much as they're there to take care of the person. So that's really important. So I encourage you to work to build that relationship. Let's see. Amy, I might have control, but it's not moving for me. Sorry, everyone. There it goes.
Oh, sorry about that. I'll be happy to click for you.
Okay, sorry about that, everyone. So the first thing, like Amy mentioned, is there's a lot of paperwork, and it might seem like you're being buried in paperwork and why do they need all of this stuff, but it is really important that the community have everything in place so that they can provide the best care possible for their residents. Most of this is going to be collected prior to move-in. Some of it is absolutely required, some is not, but just be sure to talk with them. And if they're asking you for it, there is a reason why. First is going to be the power of attorney or conservatorship. It's not very common for people to have a conservatorship in place, but a power of attorney is very common. So if you have that paperwork, you definitely want to make sure that it's completed and given to the community so that they know who to contact and who is the decision maker. And even if there is not a power of attorney in place because it's not required, the community absolutely will ask you and needs to know who is the family decision maker, who is the responsible party. If there's an emergency, who is our first point of contact? And so just to be very clear with them about that. It's not uncommon that one person will manage the medical issues and maybe another person manages financial issues. That's fine. Just make sure you're really clear with the community about that. Something else that people don't often think about is if you're going to be on vacation and out of town and unable to get there in emergency, then who should be that next person? So making sure to tell the community if you're going to be out of town, the dates, and who the next person will be. When I was the executive director of a community, I once called a son in Italy. I didn't know he was in Italy, but to tell him about something that was going on in the community because he had neglected to tell us he was going to be out of the country. So it's just helpful to everybody if you have that in place and can try to remember to let the community know that. The advanced healthcare directives, again, they're not required, but if you have them, make sure the community has them. In case of an emergency, they will pass them on to emergency personnel, first responders, the hospital. So anything like that that you want to make sure is seen during an emergency situation, they need to have on hand. The one thing that is required for move into a residential community here in California is the POLST. That stands for the Physician's Order for Life-Saving Treatment. That will spell out anywhere from I don't want any heroic measures taken to save my life to please do everything possible to save my life and anything in between. So regardless of what your choice is there, you do need to fill out that form. It has a place for family signature as well as the physician's signature. So you definitely need to sign that and get it to the community. They will need that prior to move in. The health information privacy waiver, the community is going to ask for that from you so that they can share any necessary information with providers that might come into the community. For example, the physician orders physical therapy to come in and work with a resident in a community. Unless they have this waiver signed, they can't share resident medical information with the physical therapist. Or very often residents have multiple physicians. Maybe they have a general practitioner and a cardiologist or neurologist. And the community ends up being sort of the storehouse for all of that information. You want them to be able to share information among the physicians to be able to get the best, most comprehensive care for the resident. So they're definitely going to ask you for this. The other thing that's very important is to make sure the facility has a copy of insurance cards. And where this comes into play as a annual reminder is people sometimes get updated insurance information, or maybe you make a choice to change the person's information or insurance coverage. Please make sure that you give any new copies of insurance cards or insurance information to the community, because again, even though the community cannot bill, because insurance doesn't, this type of insurance, medical insurance, doesn't pay for residential care. If there's an emergency and a resident goes out to the hospital or they're seeing a new doctor, that information is going to become very important so that they get the treatment they need and that the hospital or doctor's office can bill the insurance. Identification can sometimes be tricky. It's not uncommon for somebody moving into a memory care neighborhood that maybe they haven't driven in a few years, their license is expired, you know, maybe their passport, things like that are expired. But it is important to have some sort of picture identification. So worst case scenario, even something that is expired is helpful because it has a picture on it. But if you can get someone to the DMV to get just even an ID card, it's helpful and important to have on file at the community. Thank you. Informed consent. It's very important to remember that just because you are moving the resident into a community, you are not giving up control of their medical care. You're actually just getting a partner in helping to care for them. So you can work with the community, and I encourage you to have a conversation and work with the community about exactly how involved you want to be with the medical care. Some people want to know about every single thing that happens, every communication from the doctor's office. Other people are more interested in just knowing the bigger items. It really is up to you. So that's something where you have to have a conversation with the community to find out what you, how they should be communicating with you. The community will be grateful to know how you want to be communicated with, and then they will do their best to follow that. Just keep in mind, in an emergency situation, it might be a little more difficult. And sorry, I was going to jump ahead, but I'll hold up. So it's really important to let them know what you want. If you want certain medications or don't, you can talk with them and work with them about that you want to know before any medication is prescribed or given and that sort of thing. So it's a longer conversation, but a really important one to have. Also, just because you're moving into the community, you do not have to switch your medical providers, your physicians, to the ones the community recommends. The community is always going to have a list of physicians they recommend that they work with and know to be good, but you do not have to use them at all. If you are moving to a community that's in the same geographic area as your home and the physician's office you've gone to for years and have confidence in, absolutely you should stay with them. If you're moving someone into a community that's, you know, in a new area, new state, then maybe lean on the facility to point you in the direction of some good providers, but ultimately it is your choice. It doesn't matter how much the community likes a physician. If you are not happy with them, then you should use someone else. It's really about your confidence level in the providers you have for the resident. Again, with medications, you can choose to know when any new medications are being prescribed. You might be the one taking the person out to doctor's appointments, and so you would have that knowledge firsthand, but also something communities provide is a service where they can drive residents to doctor's appointments, and sometimes even for an extra fee have staff sit with them at doctor's appointments. So you might not have that firsthand knowledge, but you might want to know before a certain medication is administered. So let them know about that. Medications will all be handled through the community, especially for a resident living in a memory care neighborhood. We know maybe they might not have good decision making and wouldn't be able to take their medications on a timely manner. So for residents in memory care, their medications are going to be administered by the staff. So, and by medication per licensing, that includes everything from cough drops all the way up to pain medications. Residents in a memory care neighborhood are not able to have anything, even over-the-counter medications, in their possession in their apartment. So it's not uncommon. Maybe someone talks to their resident and they have a cough. Well, I'm going to just drop off some cough medicine. The staff cannot administer something that is brought in from over the counter without a physician's order for that. And it absolutely cannot be left in the resident's apartment or unit. So if that happens, don't be surprised if you drop off some Tylenol that you get a call from the community that says, our staff saw this in the room, we took it out. We can contact the physician to see about getting something for headache or whatever it might be, but absolutely nothing can be in the room itself. So that's really important. Mobile therapies, there are a lot of things that can come into the community, which makes it very helpful. I mentioned briefly physical therapy that can come in, but also occupational therapy, speech therapy. Some communities even work with mobile dentists that come in or might be on site or even provide care in the residence unit, which is great. And there are also many mobile physicians that can come in. Sometimes for people with memory loss, going out to a doctor's office can be pretty taxing, and not just the appointment itself, but the waiting for the appointment can be really, really upsetting. So at some point you might want to consider as much as possible that you can bring into the community so that the resident doesn't have to go out. Attending appointments, if it is at all possible for you to go to the medical appointments with the resident, I highly encourage it. Typically what happens if a resident is going out to a doctor's appointment, the community will send some notes over, either via email or however the physician's office likes to be communicated with, a phone call. They'll let them know what's going on, what they're seeing, what the resident needs to be seen for at the appointment that day. But not all doctor's offices are as great as communicating the information back. Sometimes all we would get back would be a prescription or a future appointment card. And, you'd have to really call and dig to find out, well, what happened at today's appointment? What's going on? So if somebody can go with the resident to the appointment and get that firsthand information, ask the follow-up questions, it's really beneficial to everyone. For emergencies and hospitalizations, it's very likely that at some point there will be some emergency situation where 911 will be called. The facility is required by licensing to call 911 first and then call the family and notify them. The facility's obligated to get the care for the resident as quickly as possible. And sometimes there have been families that say, well, gee, you know, I don't want my mom going out in an ambulance. Please call me first and I'll decide if it's an emergency, and I will come over and take my mom to the emergency room. The community cannot do that, and they will actually could get a fine from licensing if they are doing that. It is up to them to get the emergency care. The fire department or the paramedics will come out, they will assess, and they can decide if it is an emergency that the person needs to go, which most often they will, or they can check someone out and say, gee, we don't think this is an emergency. Have them follow up with their physician, you know, tomorrow or first thing or whatever. But the community can't make that call. Even with nurses on staff, they're not allowed to make that call of whether or not to send the resident to the hospital. So when in doubt, the staff is going to call 911 to get that service for the resident, to at least get an assessment by first responders. An interesting thing happens though when a resident becomes hospitalized. The hospital does not communicate directly with the community. They're going to communicate with you, the family, the responsible party, the power of attorney. So the community can call and request information, but it's not uncommon for us to get the community to get the information through the family. So if your resident is out at the hospital and you're getting updates from the hospital, please do pass those on to the community staff, because they might not be getting that information depending on when they call and who they're able to connect with on the phone. As far as the hospital is concerned, you know, that resident belongs to the power of attorney, the conservator, the family, not to the community. So just something to keep in mind. Hospice care, I highly encourage everyone to, you know, get more information about hospice care. It is such a wonderful service that is available to residents living in assisted living memory care. Hospice is available at end of life. Typically, there needs to be a 6 to 12 month prognosis for someone to qualify for hospice care. But it is very beneficial. It's beneficial to the resident, to the family, and to the staff even. But they just allow for there to be some extra eyes on the residents. Extra care nurses typically come in at least once or twice a week to check on that resident. But one of the most important things that hospice care allows for is if a resident is at a stage in their disease where we know there's nothing more that can be done for them, even if they go out to the hospital or the emergency room, there's nothing that can be done to cure them, make them better in any way. So we're accepting that this person is at where they're at, and we're trying to give them as much quality of life as possible. That's when hospice comes into play, because that is the one exception to having to call 911. If someone is on hospice and has an emergency situation, we can call hospice, the community can call hospice to come out and assess and see if that person does need to go to the hospital. Now, if it's something like, you know, a broken arm, a broken leg that can be taken care of, yes, they're going to go out to the hospital, but most often residents on hospice don't have to go out to the emergency room anymore, which can be a relief at a certain point for families and definitely for the residents. So frequency of visits, one of the things Amy mentioned earlier, where that communities will sometimes say, you know, please don't come visit for the first couple of weeks. And I reiterate what Amy said about that, you know, it's up to you, but it is a time of bonding. What I would just say about that is during that first 2 weeks, definitely don't take the resident out of the community. There will come a time that if you want to go out to lunch or for a walk or whatever, that it'll be perfectly appropriate. But leaving the community during that first 2 week to 30-day adjustment period will make it really difficult for the resident coming back in. As far as frequency of visits, there's no right or wrong answer. It really is all about what works for you and for the resident. If you had a habit of stopping by every day on your way home from work for 5 minutes, and that still works for you, then that's great. If you used to visit once a week for a longer visit, that's great too. There's no right or wrong. It's really all about what works in your schedule. For the resident, the further they get in their memory loss, it's going to be more about the visit itself than how often, because when you're there, they're going to enjoy it. They're going to be happy. But after you leave, there may not be the memory that you were just here today. So it might get to the point where whether you're there every day or once a week, they can't really recognize that difference because of the memory and time. So it's just about focusing on making it a good visit. If your visit's going to be rushed and you're stressed and not able to enjoy the time there, then I suggest not going, because the resident will pick up on that stress and then it's not going to be good for them. Amy also talked about time of day, and visits in the evening sometimes are not as comfortable for people, because that tends to be a more confused time for people with memory loss. So just to keep that in mind as well. For respecting the culture of the community. So when you're going to visit someone in a memory care community, you're not only going into their home, you're going into the home of all the people that live in that memory neighborhood. Most communities are set up with a central living room, maybe even a central kitchen area, TV room area. That's like going into someone's living room or going into someone's personal kitchen. So if you do go to visit in the evening or really early in the morning, you might see other residents in their bathrobe, having a cup of coffee or an evening snack before bedtime. So don't be put off by that. That really is a good thing. It shows that the residents are comfortable in their environment and really do consider it home. So just keep in mind that you will see that. You'll see different things, not just everyone, perfectly put together every day. People are comfortable in their homes. And also, most communities encourage residents to spend as much time as comfortable outside of their apartments and think of their apartment, their unit, just as a bedroom. So you're going to want to see people out in those common areas visiting with each other. It really just makes the community culture much better and more inviting for the residents. So when a community cannot meet a resident's needs, there are a few things that are just not allowed at all in assisted living communities. Feeding tubes, ventilator, if a resident in memory care, depending on the community, if a resident in memory care needs insulin, that can be questionable. So those are something you should ask about. Most communities can manage an insulin-dependent diabetic if they're on a set dose of insulin. But if somebody is on what's called sliding scale, where their insulin is adjusted on a daily or even sometimes through each dose, some communities can't handle that. To be able to do that sliding scale insulin, you have to have a nurse on staff 24 hours a day. So that's a question to ask if it's appropriate for the medical condition of the person you're caring for. But the feeding tube, ventilator, if somebody has a wound, in the old days they used to be called bed sores, but a pressure ulcer that is at a certain level, and there are stages through physicians' offices. If it's beyond a certain stage, they cannot have it in the community. So really it's about having a conversation with the community about, okay, when would my person need to move somewhere else? When would they get to the point that you cannot care for them in this community, and have that conversation. Outside of the health and safety code regulations, different communities have different levels of care that they want to provide. you know, if you've toured different communities, you've seen they're all very different. Well, it's not just aesthetically different. Communities can choose the level of care they want to provide. Some maybe want to provide care for people who are more physically well. And when somebody gets to the point where they're incontinent or in a wheelchair, they might not be able to stay at a community because that community doesn't provide that care. So definitely have those conversations and ask about it. Another thing that would be an issue is if a resident is physically aggressive. Many residents can have their moments of agitation and frustration, and that's to be expected, but it's a different issue if a resident becomes physically aggressive and is putting their hands on other residents or staff. The community has an obligation to protect the safety of the other residents and staff. So if an incident like that happens, you will definitely be getting a call from the community, and you know, to see what interventions can be put into place. And if those interventions don't work, they might not be able to stay at the community. But again, you're going to get communication from the community staff. They're going to be reaching out to you. None of this should ever come as a surprise. No one should ever sit across from you and say, we're not able to keep the resident here any longer. You should know that these things are a possibility. The other possibility is financial. If we know assisted living communities are all private pay unless you have long-term care insurance. And so if you see that your finances are getting to the point where you can no longer afford to stay at the community much longer, really communicate with the community. There might be other ways to for them to help you. They can't generally discount their rooms or their service. But what might be possible is if you moved the resident into a large 2-bedroom apartment 2 years ago, that might not be necessary anymore. Maybe they could be just fine in a studio apartment, which could save a good amount of money every month. And they might even be fine if they shared a room with another resident. I know that can sound off-putting to a lot of people, but it really does work very well for most residents to have a roommate, because again, the room gets to be more and more like a bedroom and not their whole house. So only being in there at night and sharing a room can provide a lot of financial relief. So talk to the community and see if there are things they can do to help financially. And if not, they can maybe help you find a community that would better meet your financial needs. Okay, so with developing a partnership, the care plan meetings are going to be very important. Prior to move-in, there's usually a care plan meeting where someone from the staff is sitting down with the responsible party and going through, this is what we're saying we're going to do for the resident, whether it be bathing and dressing, or all the activities of daily living are being provided by the community, bathing, dressing, taking someone to the bathroom, helping them with meals. This is the time that you're going to collaboratively look at what is going to be provided, how often, how much in depth. Maybe someone needs help with a shower, but they just need help to have the shower turned on and have somebody to be there for safety, or do they need somebody to turn on the shower, wash their back, wash their hair, and do everything for them? So this is the nitty-gritty part, and it's really important. It will take time to get through this care plan because the staff is going to want to go through sort of each section of the person's day to help meet their routine from at home as much as possible. There also will typically be a second care plan meeting after 30 days or so that the resident has been in the community, just to update, like, okay, these are the things that were going on at home, this is what we're seeing here, and maybe to modify it a little bit. Or the community might say, you know, gee, you said we needed to do everything for so-and-so in the shower, but maybe they're able to do a lot more than we thought. So the community's goal is going to be to try to keep the resident as independent as possible, and they're going to let you know that. On the flip side, they might be coming to you and saying, gee, the resident is actually not able to feed themselves on their own, and we're providing more assistance. So they're going to let you know. So after that first initial care plan meeting and then the 30-day update, usually those care plan meetings will be every 6 months, or if there's been a change of condition. Change of condition could be if there's been a fall and so the care level has changed because of an injury or maybe a hospitalization. And the community needs to do a little bit more in the meantime while somebody's recovering from an illness, those sorts of things. But typically they're going to be about every 6 months. Those care plan meetings are your time to talk to the staff and communicate with them about what's going on, but don't wait 6 months for something that's bothering you, that you're concerned about. The community staff really does want to hear from you and partner with you. And the more you can tell them and share about the resident, the better able they can care for the resident. I can't say that enough. There have been so many times that we've heard at the community, we heard bits of information after a resident had lived with us 6 months that we thought, oh, gee, that's a light bulb. If we'd known that, bedtime would have been so much easier all along, or morning time would have been easier, whatever it might be. Just a quick example, we had a resident after she moved in. She was having a really hard time every morning getting up and getting going for the day. And just in conversation with her daughter, after she'd been there, we discovered that she would always get a cup of coffee, lay in bed for 30 minutes and watch the Today Show before she got up and started her day. And so when we started bringing her a cup of coffee in bed, giving her 30 minutes and going back, all of a sudden it was a whole different person that we were seeing in the morning. So those little things the staff is going to want to do and have in place, because it's going to make the whole day go better for the resident. And, if the day is better for the one resident, it's better for the whole community. So again, consulting with the staff about decision-making. If you're not sure about, gee, I'd like to take mom to my daughter's wedding in Northern California, and it's going to be a plane ride and an overnight stay, and how do you think she'll do? Talk to the staff. They're going to know if that might work for her, or maybe it's going to be too upsetting. Different doctor's appointments or changes in what you're doing for the resident. Just talk with the staff as much as possible. They're going to help you. The decisions are ultimately yours, but the staff is there with the resident 24 hours a day. So they're going to have some insight that even you might not. And, respecting that the person had been home with you for a long time and you'd been caring with them possibly for years, but the residents' level of function can change, and they might be acting differently in the community. So the staff can give you that insight. And acknowledge difficult emotions. It's going to be hard going in and seeing someone else care for somebody you've been caring for years. Talk with the staff and say, I maybe didn't like how I heard so-and-so speak with my mother. Do you have any insight about what's going on there? Or, gee, I came in to visit my husband and he's holding hands with another resident. I don't really know what to do with that. So talk with the staff about it. And then, of course, those are times you can also call us here at Alzheimer's San Diego, and we can help you through that emotional part of it. So disaster and emergency planning, I mentioned it earlier that, the staff is required to get that emergency care for residents. That's their first priority. I did have the unique opportunity to evacuate a 104 resident community for one of the wildfires. And if I never have to do that again, that's great. I'm also glad that we had a system in place for that. But it was a lot of phone calls, a lot of communication with family. And when you're thinking about that disaster preparedness, talk with the staff and ask them, so what are you going to do if there's an earthquake, if there's a wildfire, what's going to happen? And also try to think about it that if you're evacuated from your home because of an emergency or something, and there's something different going on, to let the community know so that they know who they can reach out to or not in an emergency situation. The facility has to have all these plans in place. I recommend you talking with them about it. You know, if they were to evacuate, where would the residents go? Where would my mom be if this community was evacuated? So getting that information ahead of time is going to help you out in that sort of big emergency situation. This is one people don't think about a lot, the signing in and out, but it's very important for a community. A resident in a community, that community is responsible for the safety and welfare of that resident. And most importantly is that the resident is at the community. It's not uncommon for a family member to come, or a friend come and want to take a resident out to lunch. And if they do that and forget to sign the resident out, or forget to let a staff person know that they're taking the resident out, it can cause quite a flurry in the community, because the communities do regular checks of the residents, where they are they okay? And if a resident is not there and not signed out, the community goes into a missing person procedure where they're searching every room, searching the ground, searching the community, maybe even the neighborhoods, and of course calling family to see, did you take so-and-so out and forget to sign them out, which very common, that's the case, luckily. But it is really important for the staff to know, because if you have taken your person out and maybe gone to the movies or gone to something where you have your phone on silent, and the community can't get a hold of you, they're calling the police, and the police are starting a search for that person. And so you just want to prevent that if it's not necessary. Tips and gifts for staff. These are generally not allowed. And it's important, the staff is there to care for everybody. You don't ever want there to be any feeling of favoritism because so-and-so gives a tip every time they come to visit. And also the really important thing is, residents might like to give something to a staff member, a little token, whatever it might be, but someone with memory loss could give a gift and then not remember they gave it and think it's stolen. So the staff is never going to take a gift from a resident or a family member. If you want to do something to acknowledge the staff of the community, talk to the director, talk to the department supervisor. Typically, you can do something that's in recognition of the whole staff. You could bring in bagels for the whole neighborhood one day, or you could buy lunch for everyone one day, but individual gifts are not allowed. And just be respectful of that. It puts the staff in a really hard position if they're having to say no, or come to their boss and say, you know, Mrs. So-and-so gave me this and wouldn't take it back, you know, and they're going to turn it into their boss, who's going to have a talk with the family. So just to avoid that as much as possible, for them to be respectful of the staff. And also I would say, from being in a community, everybody wants to bring something in at Christmas, and that's great, but it's really nice to get something just on a Tuesday in February because, you know, a big bag of bagels rather than just at the holidays. It makes people feel appreciated all the year round. So. And then if you don't know something or you're hoping something could happen, don't be afraid to ask. Go to the staff and ask them whatever it might be, but also know the answer might be no. And the facility is bound by licensing requirements, their own corporate policies, but you'd be surprised what could be allowed, or how they might be willing to work with you, but also the answer could be no. But I encourage you all to just develop that relationship with the department coordinators, the executive director, everyone on the staff. And I can't tell you how many times as an executive director, I sat across from somebody who was really frustrated about a situation, but they hadn't come to anyone to express it until they got really angry. And, you know, I would much rather hear about an issue in its early stages and hope I can help and come up with a solution than have somebody get to the point where they're so frustrated and upset. So the staff really wants to know they're there to help you, and use them. The staff is a tool to help you care for your resident in the community. Okay. So like I said, raising complaints and concerns, go to the staff, don't wait, go when it's a little issue, but also keep in mind of who you're speaking with. If you're seeing the direct caregiver for your resident and you're complaining about the quality of the food, that caregiver can't help with that. That's something where you need to either see the director of dietary services or the executive director. So just try to make sure you're reaching out to the right person. You know, again, that direct caregiver, they're going to be the one you know the most probably because they're the one you see and that cares for your mom or resident primarily, but you know, they can't make a change to the medications that are given. They can't make a change to what time things are happening in the community. So just make sure you're going to the right person. When someone moves into a community, typically the community will provide a list of all the supervisors and leaders in the community and what departments they supervise, and you know, a little paragraph about what exactly is within their control. If they don't provide that, ask for it. You know, ask for that name and how to get in touch with the people that you need to be able to communicate with. Resident and family councils. Resident councils are available in the community. There should be one in every assisted living community, both in the general assisted living and in memory care. Memory care can have a little more support by family. They're typically meant to be resident led. But staff is not involved in the resident councils. And in fact, as a staff member, they cannot attend the resident or family councils unless they're invited. So if I ever wanted to speak to the resident council in my community, I would go to them and say, gee, would you invite me on Tuesday? I'd like to speak to the group for a few minutes. So it's a great way to be able to connect with other families and to hear about what's going on. So I encourage you to ask about those and be involved as much as possible. The long-term care ombudsman is a voluntary program and a voluntary position. They're someone you can call on to help with issues in the community. And actually, they're someone the community would sometimes call on to come out and help. If a community staff was seeing issues among the resident and a family, you know, certain things like that were beyond our control, we sometimes would call the ombudsman in to help mediate that situation. But they are able to come out and help. They do sit in on resident and family councils from time to time. They're able to come to them whenever they like. And they do come out and do an annual inspection of a community, but they're an assistance for the residents. And so an example of a time we would call them in assisted living, if a resident was saying, gee, I would like to have, you know, an ATM card and my son's not giving it to me, we would call the ombudsman and see if they could get involved and help mediate that first before there was anything else going on. So, but there should be a posting in the community of how to get in touch with them. If it's not there, ask them and they can give you the name and contact information for the local ombudsman for that community. Community care licensing is the governing body that looks over RCFEs, which is residential care facility for the elderly. That's what an assisted living and memory care community in California is licensed under. They are part of the Department of Social Services through the state of California. It is their responsibility to come out and inspect communities on a regular basis to make sure they're operating within licensing guidelines. They're also the body that's going to come out and inspect or investigate any complaints. So if as a family member, power of attorney, you call in a complaint about the community, someone from the state is required to come out and investigate that complaint, no matter what it is. So they will come out and visit with the staff, look into it, file a report, and whether that issue is founded or unfounded will then determine whether there's a fine or further action. So they're meant to be a backup for the family. If you're having concerns, the responsible party, if you're having concerns, you can call them and they will come out. So you can also go on the Department of Social Services website and look at the community where you are considering moving someone or where the person lives now and see their history of annual visits, inspections, any complaints that have been filed and what the findings were. I would just keep in mind when you're reading it, make sure to go all the way through to the findings, because like I said, if a complaint is filed, someone has to come out and investigate every complaint, whether it's founded or not. So just make sure you read all the way through to see what the findings were. And there is also a phone number there that if you have questions, there's always somebody available that you can call. If you're hearing something and you're being told, well, that's a licensing regulation, but it doesn't make sense to you, take advantage of that and you can call and ask the duty desk. There's always somebody available to answer questions.
Okay.
Is that it for me?
Well, don't know
now.
yet. We're gonna address a couple of questions. We are low on time, short on time, as always.
Sorry.
No, please. That is why you're here. I'm glad you're here. And actually, you were answering some of the questions as we went along. So there's a few more I'm going to address, and there are some more that we won't address right now, but we'll try to weave them in as we complete the program. So, and again, I just want to remind everyone that out in the chat, I sent a link a little bit ago that you can complete a follow-up services request form if you'd like to have a member of our team answer a question about your specific situation. But Eugenia, there were a couple questions in the Q&A that I want to turn to you. What is a reasonable number of times for staff to make rounds to check on someone in their room when someone in particular is a fall risk? It seems pretty critical. Are there regulations around that?
There are not specific regulations around that. Typically for every resident, people are going to be at the minimum checked on at the beginning and end of every shift, and then at meal times. But especially for somebody who's a fall risk, that's going to be an individual part of the care plan. So that's something you need to work out with the staff. It could be as much as every hour. Just know that sadly a resident can fall the minute the staff walks out the door.
Right. Okay, thank you. There was also a question about what exactly you mean by referring to a resident and family council. What is that? Is that an organized group of people? Is that a regularly held meeting? What does that look like?
It's a organized group of people, of residents who want to be involved, and it's typically a monthly meeting. So the residents organize it themselves. They get a little more help in memory care, but it's a organized meeting.
Okay, great. Are clients or residents allowed to have money of their own who are living in memory care?
They are allowed to have money. I don't encourage it. I would just suggest that any money you give a resident in memory care, don't have it be more than you're willing to have lost.
Got it. Yep. Okay. So not like cough syrup or something. It's allowed to be in the room.
It's
but just know
allowed
it's
to
a
be in the
risk.
room, but it could get lost, put in a safe place, never to be found again, that sort of thing.
Okay, great. There's a couple questions here. I want to refer you to our webinar library. And again, I put a link in the chat to refer you. There's a couple of classes that can answer these questions in some more detail. The question here about what exactly is palliative care. This is a type of medicine that is designed to address pain. So physical pain, emotional, spiritual, psychological pain. Palliative medicine is not just for people with terminal illness, but for anybody who is suffering from pain. And many people who are living with dementia are eligible for palliative care services. So there is a short answer, but we can give you more information if you go to the webinar library and look for our class called Preparing for a Good End. It really goes into detail about hospice and palliative care. But of course, you can also just reach out to our staff for more information about that one. And similarly, someone asked if there is a website that one can go to compare different assisted living and memory care communities for quality. And yes, in our care options class, there's a care options class devoted to the topic of residential placement, where we go through the resources for that. You can find that class in the webinar library, or again, reach out to our social work team. We'll be happy to provide you with those resources directly. In the interest of time, I will keep us moving, but there are a couple of unanswered questions, and again, we'll try to answer those as we go. So a really important topic now here is maintaining your own health, your own well-being, and next we're going to talk about maintaining your relationship with this person. So as Eugenia indicated, it's really important that you just prepare to have some difficult emotions around all of this, feeling some anger, some resentment, some second guessing about your decisions. Sometimes new long-standing or new control issues come up, and a lot of people feel guilty. And one really common emotion that I think not a lot of people are prepared for is this sense of once the person has really settled in and you see that they're starting to adapt and adjust and they're doing really well. Sometimes people really struggle with that. Was I not doing a good enough job as a caregiver, or feeling some resentment around that, all of my efforts, and then they start doing better when they're somewhere else. Just know that these are very normal emotions to experience, and nobody can be a perfect care provider at home or in a residential care setting. A lot of people really struggle with decisions about how and when to resume their own life. And as with our answers to most of these questions, there is no correct timeline for doing this. But just realize you're likely to feel some pressure from other people, some judgment for other people about whatever decision you make, right? When it comes to resuming old activities, developing new friendships, new relationships outside of your relationship with the person who has moved into the care facility. There is no universally right way to do this, and you need to do what's right for you as a care partner to maintain your own health, your own emotional well-being, and also your own ability to continue being a support to that person now that they are living in residential care. So we encourage you, we talked a little bit already about establishing visitation schedules, how often you should do that. Think about how often you should be visiting, but also think about how often other people should be visiting, right? Are there friends and family who can share that load with you, who getting them involved in making regular visits would be good for the person, those social visits. On the contrary, are there people who making visits is is not productive, is not helpful, right? Don't be afraid to have direct conversations with friends, with family, with neighbors who want to visit, but whose visits are not always sort of producing the desired results, right? If they result in frustration, agitation on the part of the person who's living in memory care, right? Have a direct conversation about what you're seeing and make some suggestions about their visitation schedules. I really encourage you to build relationships with people in the care facility, the people who work there, but also get to know other residents and get to know their family caregivers or their friends who come to visit. There's a lot of strength that comes from the empathy that you receive that you can only really get from someone who really understands, who knows the person that you're caring for and really understands this experience, all of these emotions of grief and loss, but also the joys of the changed relationship that you may be experiencing. If you are struggling, if you are looking for more support outside of the memory care community or outside of your own family, friends, your kind of natural support network, please let us know. We can connect you to a support group. We have dozens of support groups that meet. Currently they all meet virtually, but in real life, they meet all over the county. We have a group that's just for people who have a loved one who's living in residential care. So these are folks who have been through and are going through this transition as well. Finding somebody who can be a support to you, incredibly powerful. Finding a knowledgeable, experienced, and empathetic set of ears and shoulders, right, to support you. And here again is that well-worn advice, just give yourself time, right? You don't have to identify every problem and solve every problem all at once, right? Ease your way into this, tackle the big things first, take a deep breath. If you need a little bit of breathing room, right? Going to visit, engaging with this person is becoming painful or difficult or frustrating for you or for them, right? There is no harm in taking a little bit of a breather and stepping away for a time. So it is just a hard reality of these situations that a new relationship is going to develop between you and the person who's living in residential care, especially if you used to share a home together. Not only in those situations, but I think married partners or people who cohabitated, parents and children who lived in the same house, and then the person moves into residential care. This is going to be an incredible disruption to your relationship, not necessarily a negative one, but even positive changes can be very stressful and difficult to adjust to. So a couple of tips here in your greetings, right? I'd say manage your expectations. We had a question in the Q&A about, every time that we've gone to visit the person who has moved into residential care recently, we've made a couple of visits, and every time the conversation is negative. They want to go home. They want to know when they're, going to have this doctor's appointment, right? Very understandable. And I think I would suggest just kind of steeling yourself, managing the expectations that they're going to make a quick adjustment, right? People are going to make these adjustments and have different reactions. It's all over the board, right? There could be moments that they don't recognize you. They may not give you the personal, warm, happy response that you've been really looking forward to seeing them again. You really miss them, and you sort of don't get that in return when you see them. These can be very painful moments. I'm not suggesting that you shouldn't feel grief or feel sadness or anger or pain around that, only to sort of manage your expectations around it. In communicating with someone is telling you, I got to get out of this place. I don't know what I'm doing here. When am I going home? Right, back to those techniques of validation that I introduced earlier. This is where that really comes in. And again, I refer you to our communication skills class to learn more about this. But saying to someone, instead of, I think our impulse is to kind of get into it. Well, the doctor said that you can't live at home anymore, right? We really want to reason, and we want to give them a rational answer. to those questions, when what's really important is that we see what they're experiencing, right? Connect to the emotion. Someone who's telling you in an agitated, hostile fashion, I don't want to be here anymore, get me out of here, right? Respond to that emotion and say, I can see that you're really unhappy here, right? Saying something like, yeah, there's an appointment right around the corner. There's an appointment tomorrow. There's an appointment next week, right? Whatever's going to work in your specific situation. And again, I'd encourage you to give us a call and we can talk through strategies that might work in your particular situation. But my general advice is not to sort of fight them on the facts, not to try to convince them that this is the right place for you to be, but instead to just validate their experience. I see that you don't want to be here. I understand that. That's a reasonable way for you to feel, right? I'm here to support you and I'm going to help you. However you communicate that, however really makes sense in your particular dynamic. Don't be afraid to confront those feelings head on and say out loud that you see them, right? I can see that you're really mad. I can see that you're really upset. You're only going to be successful at redirecting their attention somewhere else if you first let them feel seen and heard and understood. So also just don't be afraid. Don't be afraid of silence. I mean, some visits, the best visit is just going to be sitting in a chair together, sitting at the bedside, going outside into the garden, whatever it might be, and sitting quietly together. And it doesn't have to be a memorable event, a meaningful, deep conversation in order to produce feelings of connection and well-being for both of you. And as Eugenia mentioned, they may or may not remember your visit, but they're going to have lingering feelings as a result of that visit, right? So do what you can to make those feelings as calm and as positive as you can. A lot of people like to bring activities, bringing photos, bringing games, bringing puzzles, comforting items, right? Think about things you might be able to do together. But I do encourage you to try to do activities together with the other residents of the community. Come and get involved in one of their exercise programs or outings or activities that they're doing in the community rather than taking your person away if you can, right? Every situation is different. Participating in those activities, attending meals together, all communities will welcome friends and family to come and sit and have meals together. That's a really nice way to maintain connection, even if there's not a lot of sort of conversation happening. You'll have to leave eventually. So how do you manage those challenging departures? Again, check your emotions, consider your timing, right? If you can get the staff to help you sort of slip away quietly while the person is distracted, you may be able to use, their difficulties with short-term memory or short-term recall to your advantage in this situation. Don't bring a lot of attention. Doesn't need to be a big dramatic goodbye. I'll see you tomorrow. I'll see you next week. I love you. I'll miss you, right? It could be just a very quiet kiss on the cheek and you quietly slip away, but you'll probably need some help with the staff in coordinating that. Again, just expect negative reactions. They're going to happen from time to time. They're not permanent. Tomorrow may be a better day. The next hour may be a better hour, right? So do what you need to do to sort of center yourself, stay healthy, get a little bit of rest so that you have the energy to try again later. And then just recognizing your relationships outside of the community, outside of your relationship with this person who's now living in residential care, they're going to change too, right? You're changed, you're different. So don't be afraid to be open about that, right? Here's what I'm experiencing, here's what I'm going through, and here's the kind of support that I need. And lots of education, lots of support is available through Alzheimer's San Diego. In a moment here, I'll send some more information out in the chat. Just a brief note on loneliness. It is real, it is inevitable, right? Even if you're feeling a huge amount of relief, you're finally sleeping for the first time in months or years, the adjustment to being alone, if you now live alone and you haven't lived alone before, it can be profound and it can be really difficult. It has health consequences for you. We're very concerned about care partners becoming socially isolated, both while you're actively caregiving, hands-on, one-on-one in the home, as well as in the adjustment beyond a move into memory care. So please stay in touch with your own physical and mental health needs. Do what you need to do around your environment. Lots of families that I've known have done a little redecorating, painted rooms different colors, put up new art, took down art that they never really loved, right? Make changes to your physical environment that bring you joy and can make you feel better about the changes to your environment that you're experiencing. You may need to learn how to cook. You never knew how to cook. If you no longer have your helper around the house for certain tasks, there may be some new skills you need to build. Or again, just new members of a support network that you can lean on, neighbors, members of a support group, whoever it might be, learning those new skills and finding new people to help you, not only with practical tasks, but just with, company and feeling connected to other people. When you're resuming old hobbies, old interests, old activities that you used to do, rejoining your book club, getting back to church for the first time in a very long time. Again, there can often be an emotional response around this: guilt, joy, right? Lots of pleasure around that, and then feeling guilty for feeling all of that joy, right? So just expect to sort of experience everything on the spectrum there. Do what you can to reconnect with relationships. They may have been damaged or neglected during the time that you were providing hands-on care, if that was part of your journey, right? So just be open to new relationships, meaning new with new and different people, or new changed relationships with people that have long been in your life. So here we have a couple of resources related to licensing, and Choose Well is one of those resources I mentioned before, a website that you can go to look at and compare different assisted living and memory care communities. There are also an array of directories. You can ask on social media, you can look on Yelp, just be aware of who is behind the directory or the resource. If it's advertiser driven, that doesn't mean it's not valuable, but just be aware of it, right? If it is an advertiser driven website, then, those entities that have paid more to appear in your search results, they're gonna come up higher. So just be a critical consumer of that information. Eugenia, if I could invite you to come back and just speak briefly about these newly identified issues that have surfaced around community care licensing and how people can search for accurate information.
Sure. So the number one way to get information about a community is always by their license number. When you're calling Department of Social Services or looking them up online, you will always be triggered to put in their license number. The community is required to have their license number on all marketing materials, brochures, anything that's going out into the community. Something we just discovered, though, is that if there is a change in ownership and a new license number is issued, Department of Social Services will not automatically give you the information for the old license number. So, for example, I'm running XYZ Assisted Living. I've run it for 10 years. I've done a terrible job. I have 20 bad reports, and I make some change and get a change of ownership. I get a new license number as of today. And when you look me up, you only see the information as of today. That 10 years of information goes away. We just became aware of this. We're actually we work with a lobbyist in Sacramento. We brought it to the attention of the governor's office. We're working towards, what we can put forward to see about getting this changed. But in the meantime, it definitely makes searching for information not very transparent, very hard to find. So I would suggest you can go to the licensing office and ask them. And if you ask them in person, they will pull all the information, but that's cumbersome and time consuming, and I don't really see people doing it. But ask the facility when you're there, have you had a recent change in licensing? And see if they'll give you that information and look it up that way. But just something to be aware of, because especially if you know, gee, this building's been in my neighborhood for 10 years, but I looked online and it's only been licensed for a year. What's going on there? Now, some of it also can be very legitimate because, you know, one company can buy out another, that sort of thing, and then there will be a new license number. But I don't have a solution, unfortunately. It's just something I want you all to be aware of.
Eugenia, there's a related question. The facility license number, would that be on like invoices? Would you see that somewhere?
It would be on business cards. It would be on brochures. If you go to the website, it's going to be on the website somewhere, usually at the bottom near the facility address. It's going to be posted in the community. It has to be. And if you ask for it, you can get it. Another thing I neglected to mention is if you go into the community and ask them for their most recent licensing surveys, they should have those available to you in a binder or notebook or something at the front desk to be able to give them to you right then.
Got it. Okay, great. Thank you. Super helpful. Oh, but how would I do this without you? I don't know.
Much quicker.
Well, much less knowledgeably and effectively. So just a note to make, I know I've referred you a few times now to our team of social workers. This is just to give you a sense of some of the information that they can provide you. We've got a terrific library of tip sheets with information on making the most of the transition to residential care, what to expect when you're placing someone in memory care, choosing a facility, sort of the step prior to this one. And then again, those communication strategies that I've been talking about. We do maintain current lists of the memory care communities here in San Diego County who have active licenses, and it's divided up geographically. We can give you information about specific regions and communities. We can provide you referrals to placement agencies or packing and moving services who specialize in this particular type of move. Lots of education programs that address a lot of the related concepts that we've been talking about here today. And then again, the list of support groups. I did put a link out in the chat a moment ago where you can get information about our support groups. So here we are. Alzheimer San Diego is a local independent nonprofit organization. Our whole purpose is to support people who are affected by dementia here in our county, or people who live somewhere else but are caring for someone. We have an amazing team of dementia experts, the clinical care coaches, our social work team, lots of support groups, classes, workshops, webinars. We have our virtual All's Companions program where we train volunteers to make virtual visits with people who are living with dementia, just for company, to give the caregiver a little bit of a break from being the 24/7 social director. A whole host of free support and services that is, it's always free and it's available to anyone here in our community. So please don't hesitate to reach out. Let us know how we can help you. There's a ton of good information on our website. You can call us, you can email us, you can live chat us from our website, or again, you can fill out that request form. So a couple of programs we want to bring to your attention: Managing Resistance, a program specifically for care partners, very relevant to the topic of making the transition to memory care, is coming up next week. And then we do have a program that we're doing in partnership with our friends at Elder Help on June 3rd about living with memory loss. This is for people living with dementia as well as care partners. So information about those programs and many others available on the education classes page of our website. So we do apologize for going over a little bit on time here today. There's just so much information I'm so grateful to you, Eugenia, for sharing all of your firsthand experiences and the detailed expertise and knowledge that you've got on these topics. It's so appreciated. We'd love everyone's feedback on the program. When this webinar closes, you'll be directed to a short survey. We'd really appreciate you taking just a minute or two to tell us about your experience in the program. Any suggestions or ideas for other programs are always welcome. And we will be sending out an email shortly with a link to our webinar library, a copy of these slides, and again, a link to that survey. So thank you, Mona, for being with us here today to support us and to support our folks. And my thanks to you again, Eugenia. I will, before I close the webinar, I'll put the link out in the chat one more time to request follow-up services if anyone needs that. So thank you all for joining us, and we'll see you again soon.